Welcome to the Right Focus. Why don't you introduce yourself to us with your writing name?
So I'm Terri Karsten, and that's the name I use for my writing as well.
Okay, great. And where are you located?
I live in Winona, Minnesota, which is just south of the Mississippi River in Minnesota.
Now, are you a Minnesota native? Because you don't sound like that lady in Fargo at all.
No, well, Fargo is in the northwest corner and Winona's in the southeast corner. So, but I'm not a Minnesota native. I was born and raised in California and moved to the Midwest when I went to college back in the 70s.
Okay, great. Well, tell me about your book.
So the book I'm talking about a little bit today is called Finn McCool and the Giant's Causeway. And that is just coming out. It's a legend of Ireland.
Oh, okay.
And I have some Irish heritage. And so a real,
yay,
yay, Ireland, right? Yeah, and so I was really happy to write this story that I'd heard many times. And I visited the Giant's Causeway, which is,
right.
So the story is a legend about how it was, the story of how it came to be this looks like stepping stones out into the Irish Sea.
Do you have a cover to show us?
I do. I sent you a picture.
Yes. Do you have a physical copy you can hold up to the screen?
Have. Let me see if I have. I just have the proof copies because I don't have. It's actually being released on Monday, next Monday.
Okay.
So this is the proof copy is the only ones I have right now.
Right, but that gives us an idea. And of course, I'll post your cover at the front of our video. And so this looks like it's for children.
Yes, this is a picture book. I have two picture books. This is the second in my series of legends. I also write a lot of other things. I'm actually a very eclectic writer. So I write nonfiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I write historical fiction for adults and historical fiction for middle grade readers. And I've written some short stories for steampunk and fantasy. And so I like to write a lot of different things. I don't write just one thing.
And that's like your reading, isn't it?
Yes, I read everything. I do focus mostly lately on mysteries and historical mysteries, particularly. Historical romance, historical mystery, not so much romance, more the mystery end of it.
When I started, the first book that I put out was a pure fantasy. But the next thing that I put out was more like mystery suspense, because I knew who the culprit was, but I just couldn't find them in the book. It was an awful lot like Mary Stuart or Victoria Holt.
Yes, I like her work. I like her
right.
a lot.
Yes. So I've just been all over the board, which people tell me I'm wrong because I should be focused on one particular genre. I don't think I can do one genre.
No, I can't either. And they do. They say that you should brand yourself. Well, I have too many stories to say I'm just this kind of writer. I want to. I have a lot of interests.
Right. So do you use Terri Karsten across the board? Because I have 3 different pen names.
Right now I do. If I ever do a romance, a straight romance, which I might do someday, then I think I would use a different name for that because that's such a specific genre that I think I would use a different a pen name for that. But otherwise I use either Terri Karsten or Terri Everett Karsten. With my middle name in there for some of them has been on some of the nonfiction books.
Okay. Now, are you an indie or are you a traditionally published?
My books are all indie. I have traditional publications in several magazines and like Highlights and Wee Wisdom. And then I've got some work also in American Women's Encyclopedia. So I have the shorter stuff is mostly traditionally published and the books are all indie published.
How did you start in the short story market, or did you start in the longer market?
I started in short stories. So I've been writing a really long time. I decided when I was 7 that I was going to be a writer when I grew up. And my first publication was in high school. And my first paid publication then was when I was in my 20s. And so those early publications were either essays or short stories or academic papers. And while I was selling short stories, I was also writing novels myself, but I wasn't getting them published.
So what made you turn to the indie route?
Well, after so many rejections, especially rejections that were really nice rejections, like Boyd's Mill Press said, "We really like your story. How about if you rewrite it for us?" And I did twice. And they said, "Well, in the end, we just don't think it has enough history in it." So it's like, okay, it's a good story, but it's not for you. And I started looking at, what do I want out of publication? And what I want is the physical book in my hands that I can see and that I can give to people and that I can have some readers. I'm not so interested in, I'm not planning to make a living from writing. And I'm not terribly interested in the marketing aspect, which is kind of bad for a person who wants to sell their books, right? But I am, and I love talking to people about writing and about my books. I love teaching. I was an English teacher for many years, right? But I don't necessarily need. I don't need all the fame and money. I need small audiences.
I'm not looking for validation. I'm looking to tell a good story and for people to enjoy the stories I've told.
Yes, exactly.
And like you, I accumulated a lot of really nice rejection letters that we really like this mystery, but
right.
We really like this fantasy, but we really like this romance, but. And I wasn't going to rewrite. I was on to the next thing. I thought I could spend my whole life rewriting to what they want, and they won't even guarantee a contract. So let's just move on.
Right. Well, I even had 3 different times I had agents pick me up and work with me for a year or 2 years. And one time an agent called when I sent her something, and she called me the next, like within a week, and said, "I stayed up all night reading your book and it brought me to tears." So it's wonderful. But she was unable to sell it to a major publisher. So it didn't get published till I self-published it. It won an award from, that same book won an award from the Society for Creative Book Writers and Illustrators for an unfinished manuscript. So it was, I had no doubt in my own mind that this was a good, worthwhile story.
Right. So
I wanted to see it as a book.
Right. Now, when did you start indie publishing? Because I put my first book out in 2015, but I started actually trying to do it in 2013, gearing up for it and finding a cover designer and that sort of thing.
I did my first independent publishing in 2010, and that was a nonfiction book on how to build a brick oven in your backyard. And I did that one by hiring a printer. So I formatted the book myself and hired a local printer to do the printing of it. And that one did really well. It got some national acclaim. And the biggest thing is that by doing it that way, it was not a print on demand model. And so I had to buy, I think, 1,000 copies at the time. So it was quite an expensive venture. I did earn it back, but I still have copies of that book because even though it did very well, it didn't do 1,000.
Right, right.
Right.
But you could put it up on Amazon and you could ship it out to people.
Right. And I still do. I do that. It's on Amazon. And I do a class periodically where I show people how to build a brick oven, like an overview to give them an idea, and they can purchase the book when they take the class too. So it's still, it's not out of print. It's not done, but I won't reprint it when I am done with the 1,000 copies, because I would have to reformat it because things have changed, and I wouldn't do that hire a printer model again. I would do the print on demand at this point.
Right. So when did you convert to the print on demand model?
So I think, so I went through Abbott Press for my first historical fiction novel. And I was pleased with the result, but not pleased with the service. And so then I learned about the one before KDP, Create Space.
Create, yes.
And I really liked Create Space. And so I started working with Create Space in about 2015, I think it was, 2013 or 2014 or 2015. And I really liked that model. They had such good service for if you had any questions. They had really good, like, it was easy to learn it. And I do my own formatting. If it's a picture book, I don't do illustrations. So I'll hire somebody to create the illustrations, and then I can format it. But if it's not a picture book, I can do it myself, the formatting myself, because the interior, if it doesn't need illustrations.
Right.
And I am a kind of a do-it-yourself kind of person. I like doing things on my own, so that works really well. So I've done several books, and I've also done some editing and done some publishing of other people's books through CreateSpace, and then now through KDP, which took them over.
Now, do you do your own covers for your ebooks and your paperbacks?
I do. So some of them I do myself, and some of them I hire having done. So I did an anthology of ghost stories, and I did the cover myself on that one. That was, I took a picture of a candle being snuffed out so that the smoke curled right up. And then I played with it in Photoshop to make it look a little creepy. And so that cover I did myself. And then I did a book on my dad's river trip in 1949. He went from Pueblo, Colorado to New Orleans by canoe. And that cover I did myself as well. But like the historical novel for children, I had hired an illustrator to do it because I wanted a children's illustration. And I can do a picture. I can take a picture and fiddle with a picture to make it different or to make it work for a cover, but I can't draw something. I'm not talented in that way. So for the picture books and for the historical fiction novels, for the novels, I've hired those covers being done.
How did you find your illustrator for those as well, for the picture books?
So for the first picture book, I hired my my daughter-in-law, who is a graphic designer, and the story is, it's a Japanese folktale, and her preferred style of illustration, she does some commission work, is that manga type style. So that fits really well with a Japanese folktale. So I hired her to do that. And for my second one, the Irish one, I was referred by, I had a friend, a fellow writer in La Crosse who knew somebody who knew somebody. And so I contacted this woman, Becca Grace, who is the wonderful, wonderful illustrator. She lives in England, and we did all of our collaboration online through Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
And I found her really, really nice to work with. She's very professional, and she also really listens to what the client wants.
Right.
So when I told her I want this to look very Irish, I want it to have that knotwork design in there, she made sure that she paid attention. She went through the characters several times to make sure that the characters were people that I liked the way the character looked in the end.
Mm-hmm. Right. So networking is very important.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
The other illustrator I looked at Deviant Art and looked at illustrators in there. So you can find places online that talk about illustration. You can look at their style, and then you just contact them and say, it's a good idea to look at their style first to see if you kind of like what they're doing.
That aesthetic is very important to find.
Yeah.
And Deviant Art, I can get lost in Deviant Art just looking at things one after another. So it's very hard for me to go away from it.
Well, and it can get overwhelming because there's so many things you like, and then figuring out, okay, for this book, which person would I like to contact?
Right.
Yeah.
And do you, if you're doing a series, have you done a series and looked for a cover designer that would do all of the covers for that series?
Not yet. I'm currently working on a historical murder mystery that's going to be a trilogy. Or it's not exactly a trilogy because it's 3 separate murders.
Right.
Right. So each book could stand alone, but it's part of a series. And I haven't looked for the series. I want the person to do all 3 covers at the same time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I'm only halfway through the 2nd book. So I'm thinking I want to make sure I'm finished with the first 2 books and have an outline for the 3rd book before I hire the designer, so that I know what to tell him I want, right?
Yes, because you have to aim that 3rd book toward the right kind of murder.
Right. I have to figure out, okay, so we've got this murder here. I want the 3rd murder to be a different type, and I haven't written that one yet. And the books are fun to write though, because they're set in a tavern in Philadelphia in 1760s and 17.
Oh, that would be lots of fun.
They're lots of fun. And one of them is done and one of them is half done.
I can't wait. I cannot wait.
But
go ahead.
The legends, I have a series of legends in mind, but they're from different countries. I want to do legends from different countries.
Oh,
and
I
so
like
it won't be, they'll be the same size and the same, more or less same format, but I'm not going to have the same designer because I want the pictures to reflect the country that is featured there.
Yes, I totally understand that. That's part of the whole idea of what you're trying to convey, is that these are legends from around the world. So the books should reflect that global aspect, that global point of view. It sounds to me like you're writing all the time.
I do. I almost every day, like even when I'm on vacation, I bring along a notebook because I always have something to write. I do write a blog once a month. So pretty much I'm writing all the time, and I usually have more than one project going at the same time.
Right.
Some people find that confusing, but I find it sort of refreshing. It's like if you get stuck one place, you can jump over to the other thing that you are working on.
Yes, I can't. I can do a nonfiction and a fiction at the same time. I can do 3 nonfictions and a fiction at the same time, but I cannot do 2 fiction at the same time.
Yeah, I don't, unless I'm in totally different stages of them. So if I'm in the final editing of one, I can be working on the beginning part or the initial drafting of a different one. Or if I'm working on a really short piece, because I still do occasional short pieces for
Mhm.
various different magazines and things. If I'm working on a very short piece, I can work on that at the same time as the novel,
Right.
because they're
Right.
so different in the way you work on them.
Yes, it is. Do you have a set schedule for your writing? Do you
I
have a
wish
set
I did.
number of words per day?
No, during November, during NaNoWriMo, I find that useful to set myself a word limit if I'm drafting.
Right.
If I'm revising, the word limit doesn't work as well.
Exactly.
So then I try to do, okay, I'm going to revise this many pages, but I
Mhm.
have a very erratic life schedule. Being retired, you think, when you're working, you have a very set schedule. You have this time you're at work and this time you're not. When you're retired, you have this totally open schedule that is filled with everything.
Yes, yes. That was one of the hardest things after I retired, was to get used to that idea that I was going everywhere constantly.
Yeah, and I have 4 grandchildren. So I retired 5 years ago, and I have 4 grandchildren who are 5 and under. So right after I retired, all my kids had kids. And and so that's those first 5 years or so of a child's life, you spend a lot of time with them.
So important.
Right. So that those take, and they don't live near each other. So I have that. But otherwise I do try to make sure that every day I sit down at the desk, either the computer or some scenes I write longhand still.
Right.
So I try to make sure that I write every day.
Right.
I feel better when I get that in, and I do best if I do it in the morning.
Yeah, I can see that. It sounds to me, well, I can say this. You are, like I am, you're living the retired English teacher's dream, because we're writing what we love most, which is stories.
Yes, exactly.
What do you think is your best method to have creative juice flowing?
I need to be thinking about the characters.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be thinking about them. So if I'm like taking a walk by myself, and not like, just, I live in a small town and I can just walk a mile in one direction and not really pay attention to anything.
Right.
And then just walk back. So there's not traffic and there's not distractions and everything. So I can be really focused in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can really help. That's probably one of the best ways for me to do it.
How do you do that in the wintertime up there, though?
Well, in the wintertime, it's a little tougher. I do have a treadmill, but it doesn't work the same way.
Not the same. It's not the same.
Then I have to just I can pace a little bit in the house,
mm-hmm.
or I can put on snowshoes and go outside. The problem is not really, snow is not usually the problem. It's if the sidewalks are icy.
Ice. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to fall on the ice.
Yes, definitely.
And if I'm not paying attention, it's easier to fall if you're not paying attention to your surroundings.
And of course, when we're in our heads, we're not thinking about our feet.
Right. So in the wintertime, I sometimes just kind of close off the office door. Right. And if I'm struggling with a scene, that's when I turn to longhand also. And just scratch out. It doesn't even have to be sentences sometimes. And right. I can just fill a page with ideas about what's going on, and then transfer that into the computer document.
Right. What do you think is your best tool, the thing that helps you most?
Word. Microsoft Word.
Yes.
Yeah, I find that I don't need, there's a lot of other programs out there that right. a lot of people like, but I find that for me, Word is the easiest, simplest to use. I don't really need a lot of, I don't need something like Grammarly because I
English
already know
teachers.
the grammar.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know. When I'm doing my own work, I do make a lot of grammar errors that I just don't, I'm typing fast. I spell things wrong, and I'm
Our
particularly
brains go faster than our fingers.
Yes. Yeah.
Our fingers slip on the keyboard. And so
Right.
I think that's wise. Well, what I do is after I finish my good draft, I wait a week before I pick it up and start proofreading. And then I proof forwards and backwards and forwards again.
Yes.
And I find that's helpful.
Right. And I also find that that it helps a whole lot to have a beta reader.
Yes.
So after I've gone through it as many times as I can, and then have somebody else who I know is a good writer,
right,
to go through it too, because I can catch comma errors in other people's writing way faster than I can catch them in my own writing. As soon as somebody says, "Oh, do you need this comma?" I can say, "Oh, no, I don't need this one," or "There should be one there." But I don't see it in my own writing.
Because we're busy. Our minds are 3 lines ahead of where our brain is actually reading.
Yes.
And so it's really hard to divorce ourselves from those words on the page and get to that critical English teacher mode after we've been in the creative mode for so long.
Yeah, it is. And I've also found that even the best proofreaders, so at one point I looked to hire a proofreader editor, and they guaranteed a 95% accuracy for $4,000 for the manuscript. And I said, I can do 95% accuracy by myself.
It's those last 5%.
Right. And they're not going to guarantee that.
Right.
And I think that it's okay to have an error in a manuscript. I mean, there are, once in a while, in traditionally published books, you still find them.
Yes, you do. You do. And I was reading a book that was put out in the last 7 years. And about halfway through, I noticed that I was constantly finding errors. Here was a subject verb. Here was a pronoun antecedent. This is a traditionally published book by a major writer. And after that, I started counting, and I found 12 more before I got to the end of the book. So it was very, very hard for me. Especially they confused vile with vile, V-I-A-L with V-I-L-E. And they were talking about an evil giant, but it was a vile giant.
Oh,
and
dear.
So that was really hard. That was very hard. I worked up for my students a paragraph. It was 10 lines long. I can't remember now how many sentences it was supposed to have. And I would wash it through. I would have them type it on, find as many errors as they could, and then wash it through the grammar program. And it would say that there were 7 errors in the whole document. And my students would sometimes find 3 or 4 more. There were 7 errors in the first 2 lines. So I keep trying these other grammar programs that they come out with. I put that paragraph in there, and they don't find all the errors. And so I don't go to them or use them.
No, you do the best you can. And then I think it's okay to say, we are human and not perfect.
Right.
And we're not making egregious errors like vile versus vile.
Exactly.
But a misspelled, a typo, or a comma error, or a miscapitalized word is not the end of the world.
Exactly.
But you do want to make sure it looks as professional as you can. You want to make sure you correct as much as you can in it.
Right. Right. What do you think was, you started at such a young age. I'm not sure you think about writing as being hard. It just flows out of you.
Well, it still is hard. So when I was seven, I wrote a story. I loved the story. I figured writers can do anything. They can make the world happen the way they want it to be. And so I was going to be a writer. And then periodically over the next about 8 years, I would say, oh, writing is so hard. I can't do this. Because I was writing all this throughout my childhood. I was writing. I mostly wrote like fan fiction for TV shows I liked. And then when I was in college, writing was easy, like writing papers and things like that. That was easy. And writing short fiction was easy. But then writing a novel is harder. So
yes, it is.
I guess whether it's hard, it depends on where you are in the stage. When the ideas come really easily.
Yes.
But then sometimes there'll be a point where you get to where I don't know what's supposed to happen next. And that can be, so it can be, I don't really like to call it writer's block. It's kind of just temporarily stuck on that particular manuscript.
Yes.
So I wouldn't say that it's easy. It is very fulfilling.
Yes, that is true.
And it's very enjoyable. It's like, it just feels really good when you get a paragraph down the way you like it.
But of course, we're writing what we want to write. We're not writing to market. I pity the people who jump on a bandwagon of some particular type of fiction, and then they try to churn out a bunch of those books.
Right. I think to really enjoy it, to be a writer the way I want to be a writer, you have to write what you want. You have to write what you like. And a lot of the things I like, it's hard to find. I like a cozy historical mystery. There aren't a whole lot of cozy historical mysteries around. It's not the most popular genre in the world, but it's my favorite kind of thing to read. Well, if I like to read that, that's what I want to write. Yes.
I totally get that. Do you write fantasy?
I do write some fantasy. I've had some short stories. I've done something called steampunk, which is a type of fantasy, right? And I've had a couple of short stories published in that, and I have a longer, like a novella. At some point, I had this one character that appears in a whole bunch of these steampunk stories that I've written, and eventually I want to put them together as a like an anthology of his name is Roscoe Gordon. He's a ghost whisperer.
Right.
Put that together as an anthology. I need to write a few more of them, but I have done that, and I also have an unpublished fantasy novel that I wrote many years ago. It's not digitized, it's typewritten. And I think it's a good story. And so I think eventually what I would like to do is pull it out of the files and digitize it and put it out there. But so, yeah, I do write some fantasy. I don't have a lot published in fantasy.
Do you find that when you're writing fantasy stories, you wind up with some sort of mystery inside the story? Because I was reading a few old novels, and I love Andre Norton.
Yes, me too.
I love her. But sometimes when you're reading, it's very simple for them to work out who's the culprit. And I'm looking for the mystery aspect in the story as well as the fantastical element of the story.
Yeah, like I think it's there. Have you read David Eddings' The Belgaria?
Yes, I have.
So there's a mystery element in there for sure. And it's the adventure as well, and you're not really sure how it's going to turn out. I would say in my Roscoe Gordon stories, my Ghost Whisperer stories, there's a mystery involved in each one. It's not like I wouldn't start out by saying it's a mystery genre, but there is a mystery involved in the story there's something that the character doesn't know and needs to figure out. And the reader can hopefully figure it out just a step behind.
Which is what we always hope, that our story is advancing before their brains are advancing.
Right. But you want to give the reader the satisfaction of figuring something out.
Yes. Yes. I think I've gone through all of my prepared questions. Do you have anything that you want to bring up that we didn't talk about, that you noticed that are things that might help newbies or veterans to keep writing?
Well, one of the things I think that newbies especially have trouble with is the idea of how to do dialogue and how to make sure the setting is part of it. And one of the things I would really encourage is weaving the setting into the dialogue and action, so that you don't have a paragraph that tells everything about what it looks and smells like, and then a whole bunch of talking heads with no action, and then something happens. You want to kind of weave it all together so that the setting is woven into the actions that the characters are doing while they're talking. And it's really like, you've got to think of the 3 different strands for the pacing and the rhythm of the story. And that's something I think that if newbies are considering that, it will help them make a stronger story.
Right. Right. That's definitely true, that you have to have all of those elements coming out all the time. You can't just focus on one and then focus on the next.
Right. And setting can be so much part of the world building, whether you're writing fantasy or historical fiction, or if you're writing a contemporary book. The setting is so important to pull the reader into the story. Right.
Right. I have a tendency to, when I'm writing, I want to get my plot and my dialogue and my character opinions out onto the page, and I forget about the descriptive aspect of, and I have to, that's usually one of the things when I go back through and work from my rough to my good draft. I'm focusing on making sure I add all those things in and develop those in, weaving them into the story so that I don't have a lot of things. There goes my timer. And according to this, we have, mere seconds, 1 minute and 20 seconds. I'm counting down. So I have really enjoyed our conversation, Terri.
I have too. Thank you.
Please make sure that you send me a link to your website, a link to your books, and anything else that you can think of. If you want to, I think you might need to send me a good candid photo. I might be able to snare a good one. I'll let you know if I cannot.
Okay. Yeah.
So we'll try that. We'll try that route first, because you might not have a good candid one. I know that I avoid cameras at all costs. So
I don't have a good recent one. I have some, except for like with masks on and hats.
Yes. Although that might be funny.
Right. So let me know if you can't, but I will send you those links.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Terri. It was wonderful talking to you.
Very nice to meet you too. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Write Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by Emma Lee from Writers Inc. Books, assisted by Renee Black and Edie Runes. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Music is licensed through Audio Jungle, called Background Music Loop. Its creator is Alexander Polishchuk, known on Audio Jungle as Plastic 3. The music comes in different iterations. Show notes and resource links for this and other episodes can be found at thewritefocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com when you have questions, comments, and speculations. We will try to answer you as quickly as possible. By the way, we will not mine your email address. That's rude. If you find value in our content, share with your writing friends or write a review. We're small beans here without the advertising budget of the big peeps, and you can make a difference. And whatever occurs, write on.